I'm back. Okay, is that a better intro? I don't know. Okay. So, I decided to record from my desk today. So that way I'm a bit more relaxed. And let's just get into it. Let's see if I can knock this out in 10 minutes. This chapter actually focuses on Westward Expansion. All right, so in this chapter, we primarily focus on Americans moving out west, due to the fact that they have possession of all this territory. We kind of talked about that with the Mexican-American War and the fact that we now have all this land and what do we do with this? Should it be a free state, slave state? But we know what happened, right? Slavery is now abolished. African Americans are free, but unfortunately, they're still being mistreated. Okay, let's speed it up. So, one of the things that I stress to students is that, America is what it is today because of the mind. I mean, you have to have this incredible mindset to be successful. And white settlers had that mindset. We in U.S. history like to classify this mindset as manifest destiny. And notice, I'm looking up and I'm making reference to some type of religion. So what is the true meaning of manifest destiny? It just basically means that as a nation, as a group of individuals, you are motivated, you're determined to be successful. Gotta push it up. You're determined to be successful because, you're just the SHIT and you believe God has chosen you to be number one. So Americans definitely possess that mindset, and that played a huge role in them wanting to expand out west. So besides having a mindset, what else attracted them? In this case, we would call this pull factors. What pulled them to the west? The discovery of precious metals like silver and gold, hence the gold rush in the state of California. So they weren't going there because of, Cali Love or because of Tupac. They were actually going there in search of gold and silver because Americans during that time were trying to strike it rich. Okay, so in the midst of searching for these precious metals, they also came to the realization like, damn, this land is actually not so bad. It's actually pretty suitable for farming. The only problem with accessing the land was the fact that the Native Americans were already there, and we agreed to allow them to have this land. We made this agreement through the Treaty of Fort Laramie. I repeat, the Treaty of Fort Laramie. We agreed that they could have this land and that they can basically do whatever it is that they wanted because at the time we didn't see the value in it. But once we started, making moves towards the west, and once we also decided that we would like to connect the east and the west by building a transcontinental railroad system, we wanted the land back. So unfortunately, we began asking them. I don't know if we asked. I would probably use the word demand. We started demanding that they move. And they agreed once, maybe twice. And then after a while, they was like, hell nah, I'm not going nowhere. We made an agreement. You need to keep it. Now you have to keep in mind, we have this mindset, this manifest destiny. And honestly, we're at a point where, because God has chosen us, we viewed the Native Americans as a threat. Like, hello, we're God's chosen people. So if we want to move and expand and you're in the way, then we're going to get you out of the way. And that's when the Indian Wars started. Now for your upcoming test, do you need to identify any specific battles? Not really. But there are two that do tend to come up on the EOC. One is called the Battle at Wounded Knee, which marks the end of all Indian wars. I mean, that battle was so bad that they just gave up. I mean, at that point, they came to the realization that they could no longer defend themselves. Technology was against them because we were using guns at the time, and they were still a little old school with their fighting tactics. In addition, we were being very sneaky and manipulative. My kids would call it, grimy, you green, things of that nature. So one of the things that we did that was considered to be green would be killing off all of the buffaloes. And if you've been paying attention in class, you would know that the buffalo was their main resource for food, shelter, and clothing. So, once you get rid of their main resource, you execute war in a much more advanced manner, you're going to come out as the winner. And in this case, we did. So that's one particular battle that all students need to know. The battle at Wounded Knee ended the Indian Wars. Another war that's sometimes brought up, sorry, these glasses are actually very cute and they don't have prescriptions. I just thought they were cute for the video. So, second battle that often comes up is the massacre at Sand Creek. Sand Creek Massacre. We do bring this up because it highlights how negative we can be and how this manifest destiny can take a turn for the worse, because we're doing any and everything to reach our goals, which can result in us harming people. And in this case, we started killing women and children, which really portrayed us in a very negative light. So those are the two battles that I would, keep in mind, hint, hint, keep in mind for your next test. All right, so now that we've basically forced Indians to live on what we call today reservations through a legislation called the Dawes Act, we start to see the Native American Indians change. Why are they changing? Well, they're being placed in an environment that they're not familiar with. They're accustomed to just roaming free territory with no specified boundaries. And now we've required them to live in very specified boundaries. That is going to trigger a change in their lifestyle. And that's also going to give us an opportunity, when I say us, the Americans, an opportunity to impose our culture on this group. Now, there's nothing wrong with sharing your culture, but it's a little different when you push it down someone's throat. And that's pretty much what we ended up doing to the Native Americans. We forced them to change. We forced them to abandon their culture. And that pretty much killed their lifestyle. When you look at Native Americans today, they have made several attempts to preserve their culture. But had we not forced them to adapt to the dominant culture at the time, they wouldn't have to put forth so much effort. It wouldn't be necessary. So in a lot of ways, the Native American Indians lost not only their land, but their culture. All right. So now that we have acquired all of this land, what are we going to do? Well, the government jumps in. Well, the government's been jumping in because they're the ones that kind of like started the war. They're the ones that broke the treaty. They're the ones that created this Dawes Act that essentially created reservations that we see today. But what you will continue to see throughout this chapter is that the government is really playing this role behind the scenes. They're creating these laws that's triggering individuals to behave in a certain way. And one of the ways that they do that is by creating what we call today the Homestead Act. The Homestead Act was a grant. It was a program that was offered to all Americans that were willing to move to the West for at least 5 years. If they agreed to move to the West and settle for 5 years, that land is given to them free of charge. So what do you think everyone did? Peace. Everyone started moving out west. And we call those individuals homesteaders. Homesteaders are individuals that took advantage of the Homestead Act. Now, did any African Americans take advantage? Yeah, we took advantage too. All right. And we call African Americans that decided to move out west exodusters. Get it? I'm exiting. I'm out. Not only is the land available to me, but I'm tired of the KKK harassing me. So this is my way of kind of like starting off fresh. Okay? So we have people moving, and with people moving, they need to have different ways to travel. So the government came to the realization that more railroad lines needed to be created. And they were able to do that by creating another law. So the government wanted the railroads. By the way, I had to stop because something was wrong with my phone. But back to the conversation. We needed more railroad lines, and we needed to develop an incentive to encourage railroad companies to build more lines at a faster pace. So we created a program for railroad companies as well. We pretty much gave away free land. We was like, look, if you build X amount of lines in this short time frame, we will give you that land. And of course, the railroad companies, they follow suit. They fell for it because they knew the value in having possession of land. And their goal was to, at some point, resell it for profit. Now, in order to get those railroad lines built at a fast pace, it required more manpower. And we were able to get that by allowing Chinese immigrants to migrate to the United States. Unfortunately, Chinese immigrants face a lot of racial discrimination. But at the same time, what the hell? I'm sorry. At the same time, they were able to afford a much better lifestyle here in the United States. Okay? All right. So what else do you guys need to know for the test? I'm thinking. Give me a moment. Let's talk about women. So women were moving out west, some alone, some with a man. But this was a great opportunity for women. In what way? Women were treated differently. Women were treated as equals, okay? Side by side, equals. They were honestly needed. Because the truth is, in order to really get the job done, you need a female on your team. So the men said, oh my God, we need more manpower. So they came and got us. And as a result of that, we were able to build the West Coast portion of the United States of America. Now, you know women, it's a favor for a favor. So if you want us to put in the work, we need you to treat us with RESPECT. Find out what that means to me. Okay, let's get back into it. So women were definitely treated as equals. They were given equal rights, and they were able to vote before everyone else. In other words, they were able to vote prior to the enactment of the 19th Amendment. So it's safe to say that the women on the West Coast were definitely ahead of their time. Now, we have moved to the West. We have removed the Native Americans from most of the land on the West Coast. The government has provided incentives for settlers to move out west, as well as providing incentives to the railroad companies to build additional railroad lines. So we're now there. It's all there. But you know, whatever comes up must always come down. So as a result of us settling in unfamiliar territory, we were now faced with some challenges. We, meaning the American settlers. So on your test, you will need to be able to identify the problems that they faced and the solutions that were created to solve those problems. One particular problem was a lack of trees. Not because they were hot. It was because trees were viewed as a resource to build homes. And as a result of them not having that resource on the West Coast, they ended up having to develop a different way to build their homes. We called those homes sod houses. I repeat, sod houses. These are homes that are made using prairie turf, and during the winter, the homes were warm. During the summer, the homes were cool. So it was like no need for AC. You get it? All right, so that was one problem, followed by a solution. Another problem that they faced was just having to adapt to farming on different terrain. They realized that, hey, we need some new tools. Like the tools that we've been using in the East just won't cut it in the West, because the West Coast, for the most part, has a much drier environment. So you don't need to know all the tools that were invented and or created, but you definitely need to know the steel plow. And I believe like the best invention that was created was the barbed wire. So what barbed wire meaning fence, okay? So why is a simple invention like a fence revolutionary during this time in history? Well, there was a lot of beef chow, not just between the American Indians and the Americans, but there was actually a lot of conflict and beef between cattle ranchers and farmers. Now, if you're a cattle rancher and you don't have any barbed wire, your animals are now, they're just running wild. We call that an open range. And as a result of them doing that, they may end up ruining the farmer's crops. And that's where the beef starts. So the barbed wire was revolutionary because it pretty much allowed the cattle ranchers to control their cattle, and it prevented their cattle from ruining the farmer's crops, which at the end of the day stopped all of the fighting. Get it? All right, so I'm trying to think of any other problems and solutions. That's the bell. My 8th period is about to walk in. Look, education. You have all of these new tools, but you don't even know how to use them. So the government stepped in like they always do, and they created this program under an act called the Morrill Act. The Morrill Act provided land to states that created colleges and universities specializing in the agricultural industry. So when you think of colleges and universities like Florida A&M University, those universities were initially created to help promote and build the agricultural industry. All right, so problems. Problems involved. No trees, let's build homes using prairie turf. No proper materials, let's create some new ones. Not materials, no proper tools, let's create some new tools. That's like the barbed wire and the steel plow. We don't really know what we're doing. We lack education. Government steps in. The Morrill Act, colleges and universities. The last problem that was somewhat addressed, but not addressed, was the fact that farmers were now running into a lot of debt. I mean, they're taking out loans to buy all of these extravagant tools. They're taking out student loans to go to these prestigious agriculture and mechanical universities, and now they're broke. Okay? How do they solve this problem? Some farmers were selling their land to railroad companies, and these railroad companies were creating these bonanza farms that only focused on growing one crop. Sounds good, sounds simple, but you can't always put all your eggs in one basket. So the success of those farms were short-lived. And when you look at it, I mean, you can sell your land, but then what's next? who's to say you're selling the land for an amount that will get you out of debt? So I know in general for every problem there's a solution, but to kind of close out this chapter, that was one particular problem that the farmers did have trouble solving. And what you will see after this test and in the next chapter is that the farmers came to the realization that, hey, sometimes, problems aren't solved by just creating something or, in other words, like, this isn't something that can be handled overnight. And you're going to see how the farmers address their debt and how they start to demand the government to advocate for them, to serve and protect them. In other words, we got a movement coming. I think I covered everything. I think I covered, mindset, what attracted us to the West. I'm looking at my notes, by the way. Us clashing with the Indians. What happens once we remove them. The programs that were available to the people, as well as companies to help develop the West. And then we end off by discussing the problems that they face, because, not everything is all peachy and cream. I got kids at my door, so I gotta go. And I really hope this video helps you guys pass the next test. So, like, subscribe, share with other students that are taking this course, because we're all learning the same thing. And I hope I have been pivotal in you learning this material. Have a great day. See you next time.